Welcome to the Region 5 channel, a place to stay connected, informed, and inspired to change lives. Today, we have our second episode of our graduate series hosted by our RGR5, Lazaro Lopez Mendez. For today's episode, we have Alondra Escobar, who is pursuing her PhD in bioengineering at Rice University. We hope you enjoy.
Hola Lobos, ¿cómo están? Mi nombre es Lazaro Lopez Mendez. You already know me. I'm your regional graduate representative, and welcome to the episode 2 of the graduate series podcast that we have. Today, we're going to be learning a lot on how to jump from a bachelor's degree to a PhD. Our guest is Alondra Escobar. She's the graduate ambassador from SHPE Rice University. And Alondra, she's from Mazatlan, Mexico. She completed her bachelor's at the same university as me, at UTRGV, University of Texas at Rio Grande Valley. And then after her bachelor's, she went to pursue a PhD in bioengineering at Rice University. She was involved in research and some internships during her undergrad. And also, she was a tutor. She was a math tutor and a chemistry tutor. She, I think, completed some certification of tutoring because of her level of expertise. And today, we'll be learning with her how to jump from a bachelor's to a PhD. Let's welcome Alondra. Hola Alondra, ¿cómo estás? Welcome to the episode 2 of this regional graduate podcast. How are you doing?
Second episode. Wow, so I'm one of the first.
I'm sorry?
I'm one of the first.
Yes,
that's good.
You're the second one. That's really good.
I'm good. Thanks for asking. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Just got out of the lab, and I think by what we were talking about, you're still on the lab, right? You're still
working? I'm still in the lab.
Okay. So yeah, my the lab is already done. So let's start, Alondra. We want to know you. We want to know a lot of the things that you have been done, and we want to learn from your expertise and your experiences from a bachelor's to a PhD, and what are you doing right now? So the first question is usually for the grads, since they're doing a master's or a PhD, what was the thing that inspired you to pursue a PhD?
So let me tell you something. So just so like the people know, you did give me a list of questions that or guidance for questions that you were going to ask me. So I was thinking about this question, and I would say it goes back all the way to my sophomore year when I was in my undergrad. I realized that there were a lot of things that I did not know. And somehow when I was a sophomore, I knew that I knew that even though I was a sophomore, after graduating from my bachelor's, somehow I knew that I would still have this need of, knowing more. Yeah. So when I was a sophomore, I started looking into graduate programs. At that point, I honestly didn't know what a PhD was. No one in my family has ever done graduate school. No one in my family has even studied in the States. So this it is still a pretty new concept to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same here. You're a first generation student, right?
Yes.
First generation college student.
Yes, first generation, probably. So when I was a sophomore, like I said, I started Googling graduate programs, just what is it, what is a grad program 101? And I came to this, I'm pretty sure it's obvious, but now it's obvious for a lot of people, but it was a very new concept for me. I didn't know that most schools don't fund master students. They will give you a job, or they maybe will waive some of your classes. I think UTRGV is it's in a very privileged position because it allows some students or it waives some classes for their students, or it helps them with some of the payments. But that was the very first hard piece of knowledge that I had to swallow. If I needed to go to grad school, if I wanted to go to grad school, I needed money. And as international students, everything gets more complicated for us when it comes to the economic issue. So then I say, fine, a master's is, out of the line. I would have to work for a few years, save some money. And then if I want to later on go back to school. And then I realized that there was another option, a little bit longer option, but it was still an option. I learned what PhD programs were. And luckily for me, I learned that these programs, at least in the States and most countries in Europe, fully fund the students. They pay for your tuition, all of your classes. You don't actually have to take a lot of classes during your PhD, but the classes that you have to take, between 4 or 7 classes, they pay for them. And they also give you a stipend. A stipend is a pretty word for, it's a fancy word for saying salary, because they don't say salary because it's not actually a salary.
Yeah.
Because we're working a lot of hours, but it's
and we get paid by the hourly rate. We will make a lot of money. But
Exactly. Plus, we're getting a lot of experience. They're not. It's not that they're hiring us just as workers. They're hiring us, but they're also willing to teach us something. So that's why the term salary doesn't apply that well here. So that's why it's called stipend. Stipend, it's just a pretty word to say, we'll give you enough money so you can live comfortably and you don't have to worry about getting a job while you do your PhD. Then I said, fine, I'm sold for that. How do I get a PhD? Then I found that it is extremely difficult. It's not impossible, but you do need to plan ahead for that. I very often ran across people who think that for every single field, even if it's not STEM, every single field, you do need to have a bachelor's and a master's to then enter a PhD program. I know that is a case for some fields, like I think psychology, but just talking about the STEM careers, the STEM fields, it is my understanding that you do not need a master's to enter a PhD program. More specifically, in my field, bioengineering, you do not need a master's to enter a PhD program, but you do need to show that you have enough experience, or that you have enough skills, or that you have the capacity, the soft skills, whatever you're gonna need to learn in your PhD, you need to show that you can overcome that challenge. You don't actually need to show that you have done a lot of stuff, but you need to show that you can do a lot of stuff.
Okay. Yeah, like you mentioned, I think when you realize that, you started to, like you mentioned, you start to gather those skills. So Alondra, you mentioned that your field is bioengineering. Tell me more about your PhD, because I believe at least the audience that hears and some engineers we don't know, like, what is it that you bioengineers guys do? 'Cause there's I think there's a small percentage of engineering that the bioengineers do. So tell me about your PhD. What do you do? What's bioengineering?
Yeah, so answering the first question, well, bioengineering is now a very, very broad field. It's like, I don't know, saying I like Mexican food, that's just very broad. You have tacos, you have enchiladas, or like saying you like Mexican food, it's not targeted enough. You need to say specifically, I like chilaquiles. So bioengineering is sort of like that. A very popular subfield within bioengineering is genetics or sync biology. You also have therapeutics, you also have robotics. I am particularly in I would say not that popular field, and not because it's less cool. I think it's actually cooler than the other subfields, but I just, it is my personal experience. I have seen less people in this field, which is optics. Well, optics is really physics, and that can be applied to many fields. So it's a very broad field.
So what's your PhD about? You were telling me a few days ago what was
So
it about, and I didn't even knew what your PhD was about.
yeah, that's another funny story. So when I was finishing my undergrad and was applying for PhD programs, I happened to have a very particular interest in optics. And I mean, if you wanted to categorize optics in, a hard, square box, you would say, okay, yeah, optics is physics. But I wasn't looking to apply for physics programs. I knew I wanted to apply for bioengineering programs because that's the application that I wanted to pursue. I just wanted the methods and the way to the optics. But anyways, and then, later on, I took the decision to come to Rice. And, the next step then was look for or take a look at the professors that are at that school. And by the way, when you're selecting your school, you should also take into consideration what are the potential professors that you would like to work with. This is a tip that a lot of people gave me when I was deciding for a grad school. I mean, once I had several offers and I had to make a decision, a lot of people told me, don't choose a school just because of one professor. Let's say, I don't know, you want to go to, I don't know, U of Washington, but the only reason you want to go to U of Washington, it's because this one professor that does this, that performs this very particular set of experiments or these very particular research that no one else does. If that's the only professor that you like and no one else, then you shouldn't pick that university because, stuff happens.
Okay.
And if that professor can't take you that year, if he doesn't have funding, if, anything could happen. But anyways, back to the story. So I decided to come to Rice. And I was looking for potential professors that I could talk to, where labs where I could rotate. And I found this professor. Well, someone actually recommended me this professor. He said, hey, you should go check out Jacob's lab, Dr. Jacob Robinson's lab. He said, one of my friends said, hey, he's doing some very cool stuff with microscopy, and he does also neuroengineering. You should check that out. And I was like, fine. So I did write him an email. I ended up meeting with him. I told him what I was interested in to see if the things I was interested in or passionate about would match with his research interest, with his research interest, and more specifically with the projects that he had available at the time. Because that's another thing. You may like, the research that a professor is doing, but you need to be very, very concrete with the professor and discuss what projects are available or what ideas do you want to start. I mean, what projects are available in case that you want to take a project that a previous student has been working on. If not, you want to be really clear about what interest do you have. And anyways, I ended up really, really liking this professor, Dr. Jacob Robinson. I rotated with him. In my university, you have to do, when you join a PhD program, you have to do rotations with several labs before choosing one. It is mandatory. If I'm honest, when I first joined, I wasn't really happy with that because I thought I already knew what I wanted and I thought I knew better. So I was, fine. My thought was, fine, I'll go through these rotations, but I don't really need it. I already know what I'm going to choose. But it turns out that I changed my mind. I know not all universities require these rotations, but if someone has the option to do or to see other labs, even if they already know what they want, I completely support that idea. I ended up changing my mind. But yeah, I joined Dr. Robinson's lab, and it's been a wonderful and a very challenging experience. It is every single day a very challenging experience, but
What do you do in Dr. Robinson's lab?
he does neuroengineering. He has many, many projects, and I could not possibly explain to you in depth what each of the project does. His mind's crazy.
No,
He's
but
attacking the neuroscience field from every possible angle. He has a project, for example, where some of his students design bioimplantable devices, meaning very tiny electrical devices that go under your skin, or right now under mice skin. And they try to either send impulses, meaning send signals. They try to collect signals and make some meaning out of that. And they also try to see what is the best way to make those bioimplantable devices as tiny as possible. And a fun fact is that one of the things that most of the times takes most of the space is a battery. So they have a whole project on how to wirelessly send power to the bioimplantable devices. That's just one of the many projects he has. That's not the project that I'm particularly working in, but it's very cool to showcase.
Got it. You told me that you're working. You developed, or I don't know if you're still developing a microscope. Are you still?
Yeah, that was it was a very happy ending for me, because even though I joined a neuroengineering lab, and I say even though because I was in my initial plan. I never thought I never thought I would have interest towards the neuroscience field. It was a very happy ending because I was able to combine a new application that was completely new for me. I was able to combine that with the interest that I had for optics. So yes, I was extremely lucky and extremely blessed to start the lab with this amazing project where I got to build a microscope. It's a 3D scanning microscope where you can basically record the movement of live animals in 3D. You can't record the movement as they happen, as the movements happen in real life. And we're particularly interested in the neural circuits of these tiny jellyfish that are hydra. They're their size is about from 1 to 2 millimeters. And we're looking at their neural circuits. They don't have a brain or anything, but they have neurons distributed all across their body. And because they're so tiny and their body is transparent enough, we can scan their whole body and capture their activity with this amazing microscope. The microscope was developed by Elizabeth Hellman's lab in Colombia in about 5 years ago. You can look up the papers up. The microscope is called Scape, and we were extremely fortunate to have that collaboration with her where we could replicate the microscope in our lab. And like I said, I was lucky enough to be the one who built the replica. of the microscope.
That sounds good. Like building a microscope from scratch, and a 3D microscope that can capture 3D images. I don't know. That's way
Yeah,
too much.
exactly. Imagine if like I'm running and you could capture, like a hologram of me moving in real time.
Mhm.
That's what we're doing, but with very tiny, tiny, tiny animals.
That's really interesting. And with that, I think like challenge comes every day, like you were mentioning. Each day is a challenge. Can you tell me how did you feel that change? Because in a bachelor's, you have your 4 or 5 courses, you have your homeworks, you have your study, you have your test and whatnot, right? But how did you feel that transition? Because I know that you jumped from bachelor's. I think you got
Right,
spring and then on fall you were already starting your bachelor's. How did you feel the change from a bachelor's to a PhD?
right. Well, another thing that some people recommended me, not everyone, but every, like I would say more than one person said to me, if you can take a break, take a year gap between your bachelor's and your PhD, because you're going to go from 4 years of study to 5 years of study with nothing, with no space in between. Not everyone told me that, but a couple of people told me, hey, if you're able to take a gap year, take it. I didn't do it, not because, I thought I was a pro and I knew better than them, but because that was just my very particular situation. As I told you, I'm an international student. So when you graduate from your bachelor's as an international student, the rules are that you have, after you graduate, you have 60 days to either get a job at a company, I don't know, get enrolled into another bachelor's, a master's program, anything you want to do, but you have 60 days to decide what's going to be your next step.
Yeah, we don't have a year to spare around.
Yeah, we don't have at least not, sabbatical year,
Mhm.
it could be, taking a gap year from it. It could be taking a gap year going to industry, but I just didn't have the chance to do a completely sabbatical year. But honestly, I I don't regret it. I mean, I'm not gonna say I haven't burned out. I mean, just hold that yet.
Yeah.
I'm barely entering my second year, so I can't make any promises that I won't have a burned out. But um, even though I wasn't able to take a gap year, I don't think, I was behind on anything. I think everything just went perfect. I forgot what was the other thing you asked me.
Yeah, what are the differences between the bachelor's and the
Right.
PhD?
So one thing that is the same, or that at least it has been the same for me, you have to have good time management skills. And I know that because I that's my weakness. I really struggled when I was in my bachelor's to administrate my time. I was a type of person who would, register 5 classes, not because, I thought I could, overcome the load, but because, again, as international students, um, after 15 credits, after registering 15 credits, they don't charge you for classes. And since we have to pay for classes out of pocket, if I can register 18
Disadvantage.
and they won't charge me the 3 credits after the 15, that's money that I don't have to pay.
Yeah, exactly.
So sometimes I ended up registering for more than 15 or 12 classes. I also, I had, a tutoring job on the side. Again, as international students, we are allowed to work for 19 hours per week. I mean, I'm not going to say every single semester I worked for 19 hours. I try to be as wise as possible and only choose to work 19 hours when I truly believed I had the time. But bottom line, I always had my schedule full of activities. And I really struggle in my undergrad to be organized. I really struggle, and I still struggle with that too. You know, I'm not saying that's something that everyone will face. That's just something that I have been facing consistently, and that I still struggle with. Now, things that have changed. Oh man, it's just so nice to not take classes. So for my specific program, for the bioengineering track, you are required to take, I believe, 5 classes during your PhD. PhDs in STEM usually last 5 years. You know, if your lab is barely starting out, or if your project is very, very conceptual, very proof of concept, maybe you'll do 6, 7 years, but you know, average is 5 years. So I guess you have, you know, those 5 years to do your 5 classes. So there's no rush. You could take a lot of classes in your first year, but for example, this semester I'm only taking 2 classes, and it's awesome because I do need the free time to work at the lab in my project.
Okay. So do you have like a limit of classes per semester, or you just have like, for example, 20 classes and you need to complete these 20 classes in the lapse of 5 years?
Yes, you just need to complete those 5 classes during those 5 years. And the thing is, another tip for internationals, when you're an undergrad, full time means 12 credits, right?
Yes.
When you're a grad student, full time is 9 credits.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, when you're taking classes, you know, sure, that's, you know, the classes are a source of credits, but your research, remember that you're also part of the lab. Like, you're a formal student in a lab where, you know, where you have a PI, a professor that is paying for you. So your research also counts as credits.
Okay.
Every semester when I input in or in the website for our school, when I input how many credits I'm going to take,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm going to take 1 class and it's 3 credits, fine. I add, you know, I don't know what's the class, you know, optics 1, that's the 3 credits. And if that's the only class I'm going to take, I still have 6 more credits to fill. So I fill those credits with research.
Okay.
So there's never
There's any rush for you to complete those 5 classes?
no, that's such a nice thing. There's never the anxiety of I need to put more classes in my schedule to fill in the credit requirements. No, research is also a viable thing for credits, and you can put as many credits as you want, because that's the thing you were brought in here to do. You know, that's the reason why you're here. Classes are just a side thing. You know, the main thing is your project.
So any advice that you would recommend for students jumping from a bachelor's to a PhD that can help them adapt to the change?
The first thing I would say is ask yourself, why are you considering a PhD? Why do you want to do it? Because I'm not gonna lie, it's long, and it's a wonderful process, but it's also painful sometimes. And you're gonna be here for a longer time than what your bachelor's lasted.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you're going to be committed to a professor who's going to be paying for you. So it is a big commitment, both in time and in money, because you know some other people are gonna make a contract where they agree to pay for you, where they agree to pay for you for the next 5 years, you know, because they assume that you're going to make the commitment. So if you're thinking about a PhD, that's awesome. I cannot, you know, congratulate you more, but really think about why is it that you're doing it.
Yeah.
In my case, like I said, I don't come from a wealthy background. My whole family is from Mexico. I'm not even, like first generation Mexican American. I'm like 100% Mexican born and raised. I just happened to go to college in the States or in the border at UTRGV,
Yeah.
So for me, the idea of, or I guess, let me phrase it better. I didn't do a PhD, or I didn't choose to do a PhD because it was a thing that I was dreaming for my whole life. I didn't even know what a PhD was. I couldn't possibly had that dream. Like the knowledge I had prior to coming to the States, it just didn't allow me to think that far ahead. So for me, it wasn't the, this is my dream. For me, it was the desire of knowing more and seeing that in my very particular field, there is a very high competition.
Yeah.
And of course, you can get, an awesome job with a bachelor's, but I know you can get an even better awesome job with, a master's or a PhD.
Yeah, like you mentioned, for those of you who doesn't know, Alondra and I went to we were like best buddies
Yes, we're best friends.
in the bachelors, and we look at the different opportunities, and at least for bioengineering as internationals, it's really tough.
Exactly. The competition it's, it's just crazy. And, don't get me wrong, it pushes you in the best way. It pushes you to be better. It makes you realize that it makes you really dig into yourself, and figure out what is the best that you have to offer. But yes, it is hard, just to go to college in STEM. And I think it's even harder to go to college in STEM as an international, because not a lot of companies hire internationals.
Yeah, all those research laboratories funded by government, usually they don't hire
Exactly.
international students.
And the struggle, let me tell you something, the struggle doesn't end if you come to grad school. There's always those restrictions. For example, it is a very common thing. Again, everything I know, it's not because, I already have this vision of life, 20 years ahead. Everything I know, it's because, I learn it when I face it. After joining grad school, I learned that it is a very, I don't want to say common thing. I don't want to diminish it. It is a very prestigious thing that while you're in your PhD, you are awarded a fellowship. So when you're in a PhD program for STEM, you're getting a stipend, right? You're getting money for you to leave, like a salary. And your professor is paying for that money through a grant, whatever he uses to get the money. The professor that you work with, he's directly paying for you. So it is a very prestigious and honorable thing, and that you get a fellowship while you're in grad school, so that the money that you're receiving as a stipend doesn't come from your professor. It comes from somewhere else, and it's of course an award, and your professor will be happy about it, because then he or she won't have to pay for you. You will bring in your own money.
Yeah.
It's an awesome thing. But the two biggest agencies that grant those awards are, of course, government funded, and international students are not eligible to that.
Yeah.
So the struggle doesn't end. There are some private fellowships, industry-based fellowships. Those ones are a lot more targeted to jobs that you're I want to say targeted to
Research.
research. Yes. For example, if ExxonMobil is, giving students a fellowship, it's going to be because they're doing research on, the thing that ExxonMobil focuses on.
Mhm. It will be oil or petroleum or
Exactly.
chemical engineering.
Yeah. So there's still opportunities, but you need to know that if you choose to go to grad school, the struggle is still there as international students.
Yeah. Yeah, we sometimes struggle, and also that's something that I wanted to ask you. During our time in undergrad, we looked at different research experiences as summer undergrad. Like you mentioned, you started preparing yourself for PhD for grad school, and we started looking at different. I think it's Shuri summer undergraduate research experience here in the States, and uh, sadly we or unfortunately we couldn't get it. But you went to Canada. How did that happen? How did you went to Canada? Did you like that research experience? How did that help you during your PhD?
Yeah, I was very grateful to have that experience. I went to U of Toronto as a part of an RU. RUs are very popular um, in the States, and also in Canada. And I happened to work at a lab where they do single molecule single molecule studies, and I think that was an internship that gave me the experience I needed to get into a grad school. So in terms of experience, like I mentioned at the beginning, you don't if you want to go to grad school in STEM, specifically for a PhD, you don't necessarily need a master's, but you do need another way to show, that you have some experience with research. And an RU is the best way to showcase that experience. You don't need, I mean, if say, I wanted to do a PhD in therapeutics, or something very specific. It's not that only the experience that I gained during my undergrad in therapeutics, it's not that only that experience will be applicable to my PhD. You can transfer skills that you have learned from maybe other research experiences that were not directly related to the thing you're pursuing. But as long as you can demonstrate that the skills you learn can be transferred to any field that you're applying to.
Yeah, that also happened to me. Well, we got trained in bioengineering at the biophysics research lab, and then I got transferred to an additive manufacturing lab here at UTRGV. But like you're mentioning, the research literature that you learn how to do it, the protocols that you need to prepare, the work ethic, and all that, I think that's really helpful. That's what people is going to notice you.
Yeah, they more than seeing your results, they need to see that you were able to carry a project from beginning to end, or that for the time that you were there, you had some responsibilities, you delivered something. And another thing I wanted to mention, um, there's a very good program that I want to recommend to everyone. When I was a sophomore, I was also very lucky to be selected for this program. I forgot. I'm gonna have to give you the name, and you can share it with the audience later. But it's a program in Colombia where they pay for your flight. They pay for all of your expenses. They take you to the university. They show you what grad school is like. They show you what the master's programs look like. They show you what the PhD programs look like, and they show you what you need to put in your application.
Mm.
That was the pivot point for me, because I was already thinking, having questions about grad school, but what really made me commit and take a decision to apply to grad school was that program. It's just it's a weekend trip to New York, where you go to the school and they show you, hey, if you want to go to grad school, this is what you have to have in your application. So if being more concrete, of course, you need to show that you have research experience. That's I'm not gonna say that's something that will put you, or I'm not gonna say that's something that will push your application. I'm gonna say that's a requirement.
Mm-hmm.
Even if the university doesn't directly require it, the competition, will simply, overcome that. You need to have research experience. You don't have to have papers published. If you have something, fine, it's awesome, but you don't have to. You have to have excellent letters of recommendation.
How many years did you did research in your undergrad? Because I know you did research at UTRGV and also at Canada. How many years did you
Right.
spend your time doing research in
I would
undergrad?
say 2 years, and it looks very good in your application for PhD. If you are part of the lab, if you're part of a lab in your home university, and then you go and do a summer research in another university.
Mm.
It looks very good if you do that. You have to have excellent letters of recommendation. You have to have 3. And my advice, you don't want to wait until your last semester and talk to a professor that you barely know, or talk to a professor that you took his class when you're a freshman and he doesn't even remember your name. Like, this is very important, that there's applications for grad school are very competitive, so you do need to work on those relationships with people. Like, you need to set your mind with as early as as early as possible time as you have, to think, who am I going to ask for my letters of recommendation? Ideally, people that you have worked with, people that you have taken classes with, mentors. And like I said, you don't want to wait until the last semester to try to develop a relationship with them. Ideally, they would have to know you for at least a year.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that you mentioned is that the letter of recommendations have a really good weight on your application, right?
They do.
Okay.
They do. And just because that's something that you ask at the end, doesn't mean that you need to worry until the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you need to start preparing like from, I don't know, maybe 1-2 years before your graduation to get to know your professors. Like you mentioned, I think you had a recommendation letter from the biophysics research lab in at UTRGV, and then another one from your professor. Which one will be the third one that you got from the professor?
I
Was it Dr. Woodin?
I I think so. I don't remember. I think so. It's because when I apply for some schools, my third letter came from different professors,
Okay.
because even though I said I applied for bioengineering programs, for some schools I applied to biophysics programs.
Okay.
But
Got it.
yeah, even if like it's you, like, the letter of recommendation shouldn't be the only thing, or shouldn't be the only reason of why you want to develop that relationship with that professor. I'm sure you can find along the way that they can be awesome, life mentors.
Mhm. Got it. So, Alondra, one last advice that you will have for students that want to pursue a bachelor's, they want to pursue a PhD straight out of their bachelor's.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
One last advice that you have for students thinking in PhD, like jumping straight from a bachelor's to a PhD?
Do it.
Just do it.
Just do it. But here's another thing that happened with me. I completed my bachelor's in 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Until during the last year, I took very few classes, and I believe in my last semester I only took one class, and that wasn't something that I did by accident. I strategically planned to graduate in 5 years or to take an extra year to make sure I would have, the best application I could ever come up with. When I was, I believe, entering my 4th year, I remember feeling that my application wouldn't be the strongest for grad school. I believe thinking that my application wouldn't be the strongest thing I could turn in if I would have graduated in 4 years. And then I made the decision of waiting an extra year and, working a little bit more, doing more research. Just, I'm not sure, like I don't have any data to show that had an impact, but it just made me feel more confident in my application. And, that translated to me being more confident in my interviews. So yes, go for it, do it, but make a plan, because your competition is making a plan.
So thank you, Alondra, for your time. It's been a great, maybe, I don't know, 45 minutes learning from you. And thank you for your time. Like I mentioned,
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure to speak with you and to hear your experiences. And I believe these experiences that you share with us, this knowledge, will be really helpful for the Lobos from Region 5. And hopefully many people, many students that are thinking in graduate school, they can learn from it. So
yeah.
This will.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you had something else to do?
No, I was going to say, I can't say that, the doing a PhD was, a thing that I was dreaming, from when I was a kid. But, somehow I'm fulfilling, or I'm pursuing the dreams I never had. And that's awesome. If anyone is thinking of doing it, you can totally do it. It's like an equation, if you do all of the necessary steps and, you do them to the best of your ability and you apply to enough schools, the thing that is most likely to happen is that you will get accepted somewhere.
Okay.
So yeah, it's possible
like
for everyone.
Like a recipe, you get the ingredients, you get everything.
Exactly. It's a recipe. I truly believe it is a recipe. Of course, there is some randomness in the process, but if you do if you add every single ingredient, the most likely thing to happen is that you'll end up with a cake.
Okay, so thank you, Alondra. I know that if we spend like the whole evening, we can be talking and learning different experiences. But I'm gonna leave you. I know you, like you mentioned with the time management. I know that you're still in the lab. You had some things to do.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm just using you to procrastinate and not go back to lab.
Yeah, but I have class and you have to go to the lab. Thank you, Alondra, for your time. And
sounds good.
Thank you, Lobos, for listening to the podcast until the end. And hope you learned a lot. Bye-bye, and see you in the next episode.
It's great to see you, man.
Thank you all for tuning into our channel. Please make sure to follow us on all our social media. Our Instagram is @ShipRegion5, our Facebook is @ship.region5, and our Twitter is @ship_region5. If you enjoyed this video and would like to stay updated on our graduate series, give this video a like, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification button. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time.